Hello and welcome to Escape Velocity. Today I have Josh Terry with me. In 2020, I spent a lot of time on TikTok, and this is where I discovered Josh. And he is a coach. He's a man of many talents. Josh, how would you describe your content on TikTok?
Yeah, I describe it as a little bit too varied, but always sort of coming back to the framework of learning theory. It seems to be I like to think not so much about what we're talking about, but how we're thinking about it. So kind of go to a lot of different subjects.
But how varied your content is hasn't stopped your popularity. You've got over 468,000 followers and 7.2 million likes, which is an accomplishment.
Yeah, it's amazing. It started with real estate and investing related stuff, and I
Mm-hmm.
still post that kind of material. And then I went more into psychology related things, life improvement things, talk about art. Definitely gonna, continue going down those roads. But I was trying to figure it out myself. You always try to reverse engineer it eventually and try to figure out why something's working. At first, I thought they like it because it's about this or about that. But I'm starting to see, I think, in a big way, how it's presented. I'm trying to learn how to present well, and it seems that if I present well, people are usually open to it, which is great because I mean, I have such an open personality that there's no way I could stick to, a small number of topics.
Do you think that's linked to boredom?
I don't think so because I'm actually not that easily bored. I'm just very excited to connect different ideas.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I'm fascinated by. It's how I solve problems too. If you give me a problem in one space, I might, use a different field to solve it, which enables me to come up with unique solutions, but it's certainly not the norm.
Mm-hmm. Your interest in learning is taking you down a new direction. You are going to write a book.
Yeah, as I've been making the wildly varied posts and trying to find the commonalities in it, the learning theory kept coming up. I've been thinking about learning theory for about 10 years at least. It's something that's always been on my mind. And at first, I didn't think anybody would be into it, but it was funny. Like, I was doing TikTok lives, and I'm like, hey, guys, like, I was thinking about doing workshops on this, this, and this, and one of them was learning theory, and everybody was like, learning theory. I'm like, oh, really? That's not the driest, most boring topic? Okay. So, I mean, I don't think it's dry. I don't think it's boring. I love it. I was just not expecting it to go over as well as it did. For that kind of gave me the mental liberty to dive in, and I'm thrilled because it feels like a good center for the things that I want to make for the world. Like, I want to make a lot of different types of things, but I think most of it can come back to learning theory in some way. The book that I'm writing, I wanted something that would, come down to a simple, straightforward topic that I chewed on for a long time. I want to make it, as easy as possible to write the book, and a book that can be clear cut and stand alone easily. So yeah, I got to my subject matter and topic from that sort of process.
You said you were surprised about the response. Have you thought why it's been such a well sought after topic?
Yeah, well, it makes sense. You know how you like think think about you think certain thoughts and you're like, oh well, I'm just crazy, and then it turns out no, other people think that way too.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, learning theory is the thing we should all know.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I think of it. But there's a massive gap in our culture where we don't understand simple techniques to learn. We don't understand that the learning process itself can be learned. We don't get that it's a skill set.
Mm-hmm.
I just wasn't sure if I was on the same page as everybody else there.
Mm-hmm.
But from the way people describe it, it sounds like that's what they wished they knew too.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't you want to know how to read a book 3 times faster? Why wouldn't you want to know how to retain information? Why wouldn't you want to know how to get more skilled than you would otherwise at any given skill? And I mean, those are the things that you can apply learning theory to and achieve. I guess maybe we're ripe for it at the moment because, I mean, we had the information age, and the information age was great. I think it's over personally. I think we've moved on to other things. But the result of the information age was just total information glut, way more than we could ever handle. It was the information age happened based on that aphorism, knowledge is power, which is true if you have the right knowledge at the right time in the right quantity and apply it to the right thing. But when you just have a massive dump of information like we've had in the past 100 years, it's now on us to understand what to do with all of it.
So, how would you describe learning theory?
On the broad perspective, it's learning to learn. For me, the book is just one small aspect of learning to learn. I think there's many, many different ones. How do you learn to absorb information faster? How do you learn how to comprehend information faster? What is learning? I remember when and this is something that's missed in all sorts of fields. I remember when I was younger, I was so bad at math. Really, really bad at it. I struggled with it, especially algebra. Then I took trigonometry, and I found out that algebra was a wrench. And all of a sudden, algebra was easy.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, I can use a wrench. You've been telling me to pick up a wrench and look at it and turn it over and understand the wrench. There was no point. But as soon as I did trigonometry, suddenly I realized you used algebra for something. It was a tool, and I took off. And that was the first time I thought, like, wait, so what are these things that I'm learning? And I would go look up at the definition of algebra, and I'd realize nobody ever taught me the definition of algebra.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I saw the definition, it was easier.
Mm-hmm.
And that ended up happening with a lot of things. So a lot of us don't know what something simply is because we're so used to learning things contextually and by use cases, which for most things is the way to go because that's quick and easy. It's the dirty method. But it's like, what is learning and how do you do it most effectively? A good founding principle inside of learning theory for me is simply this thought, which is apply every fact you know and connect every fact you know to every other fact you know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, I like to think of it in the opposite direction. But like that's a fundamental aspect of learning theory in my mind. Connect every fact you know to every other fact you know, and then apply every fact you know. The way you would exemplify that is if you're somebody who knows nothing about Latin nomenclature,
Mm-hmm.
and you're given the Latin name for some bird, you aren't going to remember the name of the bird. You aren't going to remember what the bird looks like, and that name is going to have no meaning to you.
Mm-hmm.
But if you understand a little bit about Latin nomenclature, then you will connect the syllables of that name to different aspects of the Latin language that you understand.
Mm-hmm.
You'll connect it to other birds in the same family that you recognize. You'll see the color schemes and see how the plumage, the coloring of the plumage is similar to other birds in that family. You'll connect tons and tons of tons and tons of dots excuse me, that will allow you to retain the information of what that bird is and what the name of the bird is.
Mhm.
If you don't do it again, which is the application, if you don't utilize, like say in that case, you just need to see the bird and recall it again. If you
Mhm.
don't go through that process with the application, then you will also lose the knowledge. So you have to connect knowledge to older knowledge, and you have to
Mhm.
apply the knowledge. And to me, that's a fundamental aspect. I was never taught that in any class.
Mhm.
That popped into my head when I was walking through a hallway. I still remember it. I was in the humanities building. I was walking through a hallway. I was like 17 years old in the humanities building on the far end, on the opposite side from the practice rooms. I remember it clearly. And I was like, "Oh, that's what you do." And
Mhm.
I've never seen anybody, like almost nobody says that.
Mhm.
But if you know that that's what you're supposed to do,
Mhm.
then you can consciously go do it. And that's just one aspect of learning theory. And you can utilize that in most places of life.
It reminds me of times when my kids hate math at school because they have zero context of how it applies to anything in the world.
Hmm.
Which is a shame because I think they all have interests that would benefit from maths, and you see that they do because my 10-year-old, he just hates math altogether.
Yes.
But he's always talking about setting up a business, he's programming things, so he's using maths
Yeah.
somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
And I found that myself when I was at school. When I used to program in my spare time, my math scores would go up as a result of my practical application of these things and being passionate about those things. Connecting it to something that you can apply is super important. I used to teach computer programming, and I would always get them to do a project that they were interested in. But also, there's a meme that goes around that you start a project in, and then you start another, and start another, and you never finish. I would say never be too hard on yourself. That project has served its purpose. You wanted to learn, you wanted to recall, and that you somehow wanted to try something else out, something new, expand your knowledge that way.
Yeah, it depends on your goal. I
Mhm.
mean, finishing projects is a skill set in and of itself, but maybe that's not the goal of what you're trying to learn at that moment.
Mhm.
If you're trying to iterate on one element of learning, finishing a project could be a waste of time.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's funny with math. I used to tell people like that if they struggled with math, like I mean, of course, once I learned this, my first recommendation was go learn the definition of the thing that you're studying. But after that, my next recommendation was basically do the opposite of what you're going to be assigned in most classes, which is most of the simple math problems and then one or two word problems.
Mhm.
I tell them do the bare minimum of the basic math problems and then do every single word problem in the book,
Mhm.
which those are temporarily more difficult, and you have sort of a distaste for them when you first try them a lot of times. But those are the ones that actually connect you to your own experience, your own
Mhm.
life experience. Those are the ones that actually are able to connect the mathematical logic to the real world. And it's weird. As you do more regular math problems, you don't like get more connected to what you're doing and get more excited about it or anything like that. It's just more work. I mean, you can get better at it, like lifting weights or something, but it
Mhm.
doesn't really integrate. If you do all of the word problems over time, the logic starts to integrate with your own thinking because you're thinking and speaking and with speech. It's like a lot of our logic is done with speech. I mean, even if you're thinking in images, or depending on different people have different thought processes,
Mhm.
the the logic is still very speech oriented.
Yeah.
So if you go and you do all the word problems in the book, now what you're doing is you're following the first principle there, which is connect every fact you know to every other fact you know. You're tying it in with something you already understand, which is speech.
Hmm. Yeah, I think what you said about integration is important and making it part of yourself or your worldview. Essentially, when you say you're interconnecting all these things together, you're actually creating a worldview. And with that integration, I've found when try and learn something new, like you say, having the right definition of the thing is super important. That's what I found in all facets. But sometimes when I can't get a clear definition because there's too many symbols or words that you don't understand in the matrix that you're reading in order to get an understanding of that very thing, I've found it beneficial to essentially just immerse myself in the language of it all, watch different people talk about the same thing, and be okay with not understanding it fully until that you get to that aha moment where you start understanding it, and you've built a sufficient model with the words that you don't understand yet. I wondered, is there a thing about immersive learning, where people are, go abroad, learn a new language, for example? I found it similar in technology and finance. I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, well, before that, one other thing to touch on with the integration is it's
Hmm.
like you really want to go deep with it. What's one of the, besides hunger, what's one of the number one causes of war?
Hmm.
It's those people aren't like us.
Yeah.
Or even better, those people aren't people,
Hmm.
right? Like that's that viewpoint, right? And that's the least integrated thing.
Hmm.
Not integrating is dangerous
Hmm.
because something that is outside of yourself is a threat.
Hmm.
It's not something that you feel like you can utilize. It's
Hmm.
the unknown.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think it's incredibly important. And immersion is amazing because I mean, we know that one of the biggest strengths of a human is their adaptability.
Hmm.
And a weird part about a human's adaptability is they're not going to do it all the time.
Hmm.
They're just going to do it when they know it's time.
Hmm.
And if you go into immersion, it kicks your brain in gear where it says, oh, well, now you have to adapt. You have no choice. It's great for that reason. And another reason that's kind of counterintuitive, I think, is when you go into an immersion setting, it seems overwhelming and stressful at first. But if you look at it a little bit deeper, there are actually elements of it that are more relaxed. Because one, it's complete commitment, and your mind likes complete commitment. When you go into an immersion setting, it's very clear that what we're supposed to do now. You know how like some people are like, "Man, I suck in day-to-day life, but I just kill it anytime there's an emergency." They're just on top of it. Well, the reason why is because there's no indecision in the emergency. They know
Hmm.
what they need to do. They have a job to do and they go do it. And immersion has some of that, but at the same time, like that sounds stressful, but the reality is you can actually relax because it takes a lot of the decisions off of your plate. Where it's
Hmm.
like, do I need to be learning this? Do I not need to be learning this? What's useful? What's not useful? It actually makes it quite clear. And then lastly, when you go into that setting, it's overwhelming in the sense that it's a lot of new things. It's not overwhelming in the sense that you know it's what you're supposed to do. And possibly the most important part is it's less overwhelming because it's a given that you're going to fuck up. It's really critical to be able to learn in a context where mistakes are acceptable.
Hmm.
And when you're not in immersion, for some reason, it's, I guess maybe because we think of it more in terms of like grading and scoring
Hmm.
when we're not in immersion. And when we're in immersion, it's survival, right? It's
Hmm.
coping. But when we're out of immersion and we're trying to learn, there's always that sort of, well, did you do good? When you're in immersion, the question is, did you make it?
Mm-hmm.
When you're out of immersion, it's, did you do it well?
Mm-hmm.
So that means that there's sort of a vested interest in doing it well, which means that if you did it badly, you're bad.
Mm-hmm.
Feel shame. But we know that makes it much more difficult to learn. So there's weirdly, immersion is considered to be overwhelming and stressful, but weirdly, there are a lot of points about immersion that take the stress out of the situation.
Mm-hmm. Is there a correlation between stress and the ability to learn effectively?
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, if you have a poisonous snake wrapped around your leg, your
Mm-hmm.
memorization capacity drops through the floor.
Mm-hmm.
You're not into memorizing with this python about to get you, like that doesn't work because you're busy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Fear is something that makes you busy. You have shit to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I guess, yeah, you could say there are fear-based things that like get seared into your brain.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's so rare in comparison to consistent memorization, and usually it's a negative memory anyways, like
Mm-hmm.
fear-based trauma, things like that. So like I think that fear and anxiety, which is a big part of what the book is about, is extremely detrimental to learning. The way I like to look at it is you have to put a cap on the amount of potential damage that you're putting onto your system
Mm-hmm.
in order to get optimum learning. You have to
Mm-hmm.
set limitations. It's going to be much, much more difficult to learn if you're stuck in that fear loop.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there might be a shift in this, right? In like full on immersion, because it's like, okay, you get dropped in the middle of a war zone in some country you've never been to. You might learn the language pretty damn fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because once again, that's total commitment to learning. But the reality is we can almost never get that. We can almost never get total commitment to, well, anything,
Mm-hmm.
but particularly learning. Because in the back of your mind, in, you know, day to day first world living, you are never sure if the investment of time in this new thing that you're learning is worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always a question in your mind, well, should I, be spending my time on this particular thing? So full commitment to learning is very, very rare.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, maybe in some like extreme circumstances, fear might accelerate your learning, in that like,
Your survival is dependent on it.
yeah, yeah. But you would have to be in so much alignment to make that work
Mm-hmm.
that it would be, sort of kind of one of those flip of the coins whether it would work.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you'd probably, get some psychological trauma along the way doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, learning how to instead cap the dangers to some degree, and part of that is actually capping how much you're learning at any
Mm-hmm.
given point. I actually say cap newness, put a limitation on how many new things you give yourself at once, and
Mm-hmm.
then spend time playing with the things that you have
Mm-hmm.
and setting up a precedent for mistakes where it's like, well, I'm going to mess up on this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really, really good recipe for learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's almost like a budget for newness in a project, for example. You don't want to take on too many new things, just enough new things that you're interested with, maybe things that you've already mastered, for example. That's always a good strategy when employing even new technology and things like that. You said a lot of things about risk, about fear, and all those other things, and that ties very well into people's finances. You know, they're constantly apprehensive or scared and fearful about, if I put my money into this, I could lose everything. How do you think about learning theory with related to finances?
Yeah, I think it ties in perfectly. So another thing to know when it comes to learning is you want to learn a small set of things and then do them until you understand them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the first thing that a lot of people don't know about finances is you shouldn't learn everything about finances if you're, having trouble with them. You should learn a couple fundamental things and then try to do them.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you do that, a magical thing happens, which is you have a cornerstone that you can build everything else up on top of.
Mm-hmm.
Because learning comes from learning one thing and then attaching other things to it. That's
Mm-hmm.
the connect every fact you know to every other fact you know. So that's the first aspect, and then in terms of fear, yeah, it's in a big way, personal finances are about mitigating fear. Like, there's a reason why the number one recommendation is get an emergency fund first. It's because when you don't have an emergency fund, you're more stupid. Like, your brain doesn't work as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an actual, like, psychological thing of, like, you can't make as good of decisions. And the more I look at financial stuff and the more I look at my own journey through it, it's been a process of getting less stupid over time, where it's like, no, I don't need to make the smartest decision that'll make me the most money. I need to make the decision that'll make me a little bit more capable tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that ties into a lot of the way that I look at building up wealth, which is like you start with the emergency fund. You take care of places where you're bleeding money because
Mm-hmm.
even if you don't think about it very much, some part of you knows you're bleeding money.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you got massive credit card debt, some part of you is like, Jesus, I'm just bleeding out on the floor, and it's terrifying. And
Mm-hmm.
then you start to take care of retirement. And it's like, okay, so maybe you're 20 years old and you're like, I want to get rich now. I don't care about when I'm 65. You don't. But a part of you is still afraid that you're going to be homeless when you're 65.
Mm-hmm.
It's this weird thing of like, our desires aren't thinking about 65, but our fears are.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can mitigate your fears to some degree, where it's like, oh, okay, I can figure out how to, do basic, long-term investing for retirement. Now I'm less fearful.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have the knowledge that everything that's not going into those investments can be safely risked.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I learn how to maintain that part, and I now know that I'm not in danger. I also get educated from that process, right? That's a great way to educate yourself in the process of investing because it's low risk, learning
Mm-hmm.
about retirement investing. So you learn the first steps of investing in anything by doing that. But then you set yourself up for future success and less danger. And then now okay, you can fuck up for the next 50 years and you're still good as long
Mm-hmm.
as you keep doing that consistent investment. And what that means is now you can do a slightly more risky investment.
Mm-hmm.
So the way you build wealth in a logistical sense is you obtain money making assets.
Mm-hmm.
But the way you build wealth in a psychological sense, in a lot of ways, is become more capable of risk over time and make more and more intelligent risks.
Mm-hmm.
And that can only be done with less and less fear.
Mm-hmm. So an example would be, say, if you haven't done any research into any companies, or if you haven't done anything else like that, you would maybe invest into an index fund first off, because you've been diversified across the whole suite of the S&P 500 or something like that. Then maybe if you were studying various different companies, which is potentially riskier, but if you've been studying it well, then you can potentially get a greater reward from investing in a specific company versus an index fund.
Yes. And I should have said one other thing is you aren't becoming less afraid. You're actually becoming
Mm-hmm.
more confident.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think that is a critical differentiation because the fear doesn't go away, but you become more confident in your capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's possible to get overconfident, but most people don't. You got to be aware of like say a potential gambling addiction, that kind of stuff. But in our day-to-day lives, most of our mistakes seem to be of underconfidence
Mm-hmm.
rather than overconfidence. So, these long-term decisions make you more confident to take the risks later on down the road. But yeah, like you said, I mean, for long-term investing, it's you do the things that are, in the classic books. The I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. What is the book of common sense investing? Something like that. The you follow folks like Dave Ramsey's advice. Just the standard basic stuff of, index fund that covers the market,
Mm-hmm.
index fund that covers the S&P 500, the total bond market, those sorts of things. If you want to feel safer with some gold, okay, toss some gold into the mix. You know, I mean, hashtag Bitcoin.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. That's the other thing, is like depending on how much money you've got in all these other assets, you may be like, well, yeah, I can put my money into Bitcoin, which is more speculative than traditional asset classes.
yeah, as you become more capable of risk, it becomes more reasonable. At this
Mm-hmm.
point, honestly, I don't see why any retirement account shouldn't have a 1% allocation to a Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
I actually don't see a reason why that wouldn't be reasonable. Because I mean, the way it's described is like, well, if you're allocating 1% and that's a potentially a 1% loss with a potential 10x gain, because
Mm-hmm.
I mean that's the current possibility.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly not a given, but the difference between those two things is so extreme. It's okay to lose 1% in a portfolio sometimes for a relatively confident gain that's so high. I mean, I'm not a financial advisor, of course. I'm a guy on the internet. But yeah, not financial advice, but this is this thing that I've been seeing a lot of people talk about, which is the 1% allocation to Bitcoin is at this point kind of reasonable for the secure portfolio. But then after that, yeah, you start to look into things that you think will win. You start to look into things that you think are going to do better than the entire market,
Mm-hmm.
right? You assume that the entire market is going to do well over time, and that's your solid long-term investing. But after you take care of that, you don't touch that. You don't risk that. You go and take what extra you make past that, and you go, okay, well, what's, maybe slightly more risky, but I feel very confident that this could pay off a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to go extreme, you don't have to take all of the extra and go to Vegas with it. You don't have to, YOLO call options on Tesla.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure which is more dangerous, Vegas or
Mm-hmm.
call options. Short term, out of the money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one's more dangerous. But it's like if you're invested in such a way that you think that you would be taken care of at 65 and you
Mm-hmm.
have some extra money that you could risk, and you see an investment that might make it so that you can retire when you're 55 instead of 65,
Mm-hmm.
that's 10 fucking years of improvement.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. And a lot of us don't think this way. We
Mm-hmm.
think from the bottom up instead of from the top down. I don't know,
Yep.
that might not be the best way to make the analogy, but it's like we try to start now and move forwards. But it's like sometimes easier to start, 40 years from now or however many years from now, depending on your age. For me, it's, I guess, closer to 30 years. It's sometimes easier to start there and work backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Because if what that means is you're slowly increasing your risk over time while not reducing the certainty of your future.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you can establish certainty in the US pretty confidently for 65. And then you can go 10 years earlier, try to get some investments that have a target date of, working out then.
Mm-hmm.
And you can establish some confidence there. And once you've figured out 65, it's not that hard to come up with something that might work a little bit better. That's what, a 1% improvement, maybe? 2% improvement on the knowledge that you already have. Because it's like, let's say S&P 500 is 8%.
Mm-hmm.
If you made 10% instead of 8% on some investments, like, that's a significant change, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a small improvement from what you already know. You just need to do a little bit better. If you do a little bit better, that's not a big leap. And once you do that, okay, now you're more confident. Now you're more sure. Now you've learned more. And you can try it again. You can try and shoot for 10 years earlier while not risking 55 or 65.
The idea is that you start at the end and you say, well, if I continue contributing to my 401k, I know that I'll be able to retire when I'm 65. And then you go, well, what happens when I want to get retired by 55? And you look at the types of investments that are performing potentially better than your 401k. So, i.e., there's more risk potentially, and once you're confident with that, then you can maybe even bring that time horizon forward to 45 or 35 with a gradient of risk increasing, or your confidence in your investment abilities compound essentially.
Yes, yes. Because it's like trying to do it in the opposite direction is like trying to start at the hardest level of the video game.
Uh-huh.
It's just not the way it works. And it's strange because the easiest thing is the farthest out. And in the video game, the easiest thing is the first thing you see.
Mm-hmm.
So it's counterintuitive. But I think it's the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
And also I want to point out, like, this doesn't mean you don't take immediate opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
What this means is it changes your psychology so you can see them better.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it's like you might have something that you could do right now that would make you a millionaire 2 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 6 months from now. Good for you. But if you're too stupid and too frightful to see it, right? If you're worried about your next month's paycheck, if you're worried about the bills, if you're worried about being homeless when you're 65, if you're worried, you can't see the opportunities. You have to mitigate worry and grow more confident in order to take those opportunities. One other thing is, I'm not trying to say run away from worry. I'm trying to say the exact opposite. Because it's easy to say, oh, try to be safe, never take risks, and try to run away from discomfort. Like, that's not the story I'm trying to tell here. It's the complete opposite. But what I'm saying is, sometimes you're not capable of diving into the deep end. Sometimes that doesn't work. Sometimes jumping in the deep end will kill you because you don't know how to swim, right? So investing in practical things that you know that you can learn confidently how to do gives you a way to address your fears and do a small act of bravery by taking this small risk that allows you to do braver acts over time. That's
Mm-hmm.
actually what I'm encouraging is be braver over time.
Mm-hmm.
The braver you are and the more confident you are, the more able you are to spot a good idea, a good opportunity when it comes your way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the other thing is that when you've mitigated issues like your paycheck to paycheck cash flow issues, or budgeting issues, you can start thinking about an opportunity which is very sane, is just investing in general. But once you start doing that, you do see more opportunity, and and that you can take them, because you're still covered. You're psychologically inoculated against the next level of things. That worry about life in general and like what you're going to be when you're older, I think is always going to be there. But I think when you look at the money in your investment accounts and you go, I'm still good. That's often reassuring, but you're still always like, well, what if, especially in today's world.
Yeah, several years ago, I was, you know, in what seemed like an insurmountable amount of student debt. I just bought a lemon car, so I had to get two cars,
Hmm.
and my roommate had committed suicide, so I was paying extra rent on the house because we were splitting it between three people. One of them killed himself. That's horrible and sad. He was a really close friend, but logistically speaking, like that's higher rent, you know?
Hmm.
So that was the reality is like I got to pay more money now. And, I'm getting drained on multiple fronts here. I mean, also I'm sad, right?
Hmm.
Because a bad thing happened. He was a close friend. But like this combination of things was where my life was at. And I was certainly past paycheck to paycheck in things going wrong. Like I was,
Hmm.
going in the hole. I moved out of that actually moved out of that house the the month that my credit card maxed out. Like it was the end, financially speaking, of my capacity. But what's interesting about that time looking back is part of the terror of it all was I didn't know if it would work out in the end.
Hmm.
I didn't know. I thought, man, what if I'm like this when I'm 50?
Yeah.
What if I'm like this when I'm 70?
Hmm.
Because suffering sucks, right?
Hmm.
But it's fine when you know to some degree that you can work things out.
Hmm.
And I didn't know if I could work things out at that time. I didn't have that kind of confidence.
Hmm.
Over time, I built it with the support of, a good friend and a lot of education and just a lot of good reinforcing things that happened. They built up my confidence in that. But the thing that did it the most was actually paying off the debt and getting my retirement account started.
Hmm.
You and I would have never met if I wouldn't have done those two things
Uh-huh.
because that made me more confident, and being that confident made me smarter
Hmm.
because I saw more things. I started to take more opportunities because it snowballs. And taking care of those things made it possible for me to do the things that I'm doing now.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember the days when I got payday loans in the UK, which
Ooh,
are huge interest rates, had collections after me. And until I really started looking at my credit score over here and actually budgeting, because like I had
yeah.
no idea how much money I was spending every month. I knew I was spending a lot because I was putting a lot on credit cards. I had a young family as well. It just happens that, you know, when you start looking at your finances and you start understanding the concepts of cash flow and all those things, and then maximizing your earning potential, where you start getting surplus, then you start thinking, well, I'm X age and I've got a family. I don't want to be living paycheck to paycheck when I'm just before retirement, not putting anything aside. I wasn't even doing my 401k initially with the 401k match. I regret it every day that I look at my 401k, because I've only been doing it for 3 years, but it's a substantial amount of money, and it could have been a lot more. I think that's always everybody's regret, is, you know, not having more time in the market in whatever they've invested in.
Oh yeah, every single person I've ever spoken to that learned about investing, their first response was, "I'm too late."
Mm-hmm.
They could be 55 or they could be 9 years old. That's their response, is, "Oh God, if I would have started sooner."
Mm-hmm.
It's always the same response, no matter who. Yeah, and the damage from, well, it's like you have that psychology issue of not knowing your, like, the uncertain future that makes you make more fear-based decisions in the now.
Mm-hmm.
And then you know, not handle the finances as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then not handling the finances has, you know, costs that go so far into the future. I got that lemon car that I told you about. I drove it once. I drove it from my house to a friend's house because he was going to sell it for me. And he did, and that was fine. But the one time that I drove it, I got a ticket for not having insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, the officers are fine with it. They're like, "Oh yeah, you just bought it. It's okay. Yeah, just make sure you know," or they'll like give you a warning or something. But it was like I drove it one time and I got a ticket for not having insurance. Like I just bought the car, and fine, like that's fine. And I went to pay it, and I did that. You know, I paid it all right away. It's like I'm not here to break the law. That's not my intention. I'll follow the instructions. I'm happy to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But I had so much financial anxiety that I didn't look any farther.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that there was an extra fee every month when you got that specific type of ticket.
Right.
I didn't know that was a thing. I thought that you paid tickets and you were done. But apparently there was this extra monthly fee.
No.
And I didn't know. And I didn't know until 2 years later. I went to get my license, the address on my license changed, which that's a whole nother thing. Like I'd moved like 3 times, but I was too anxious to, you know, go deal with, you know, changing my driver's license. But I walk in, I'm like finally getting my shit together, and it's like I go to change it, and they're like, "Oh, sorry, we can't change your address. Your license has been suspended for a year."
No. Crazy.
And it's like anxiety did that, right?
Yeah.
Because if I wouldn't have had that fear, I would have had the willingness to go check.
Mm-hmm.
I would have looked the extra look to go, did I miss something here?
Did I finish it off? Did I do what I needed to do? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you're living in fear, you don't have that because you want to get it away from you as quickly as possible. I defaulted on my very first student loan. It was like a small $1,000 loan or something.
Mm-hmm.
And before I understood how loans worked, like when I first got out of college, I defaulted on that first one. I paid it off right away.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, I went to get my credit checked for a mortgage.
Okay.
And I expected my credit score to be like sky high because I got my shit together, right? And everything's taken care of. And they were like, "Oh, sorry, you have a very low credit score." I'm like, "What?" And like even the one that's on my app, you know, looks great. But they give you different credit scores for credit cards
For different
versus
things,
houses.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it was like just in the gutter. And I'm like, "Well, why?" And they were like, "Oh, well, it says that you never paid off this loan."
Mm-hmm.
And I did, but the collections agency never reported that I paid it.
Right.
And it's
Yes.
like there's just these little messy things, and it's like it's fine. Like I can fix that, no problem. You know, it's no big deal. But it's like those little things, they add up and turn it into just a hurricane of overwhelm if you're not willing to take care of them. And I think one of the only ways to take care of them is to have something in the future that looks like a better future, and then take care of your small day to day. Like you have to do those two things, and then you can worry about the 6 month, Mega Millions plan, and the 2 month, you know, you know, 500,000 plan. Like those sorts of things. You work. These two things give you stability. Working on the far out and working on the day to day now stuff. It gives you strength, and it makes you braver.
Awesome. We're coming up to an hour, and I don't want to take too much of your time. Where can people find you on the internet, Josh?
Yeah, find me on TikTok at Josh Terry Plays, and find me on Instagram at Josh Terry Plays. Those are the places for me.
I think what you're doing is an awesome project. I'm sure you've got young demographics on your TikTok, so they're in better hands if they're following you and watching your videos about their future. Thanks for your time, and I'll see you around.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Welcome to the obligatory end part of the video, where I say, if you enjoyed that video, give it a like. Also, don't forget to subscribe and check out the links in the bio. There's free stocks for Robinhood, Webull, and there's also free money from M1 Finance and free Bitcoin from Coinbase and Swan BTC. Have a good one.